Everybody, Stephen Regan here, DeKalb Asgrow Technical Agronomist in Southwest Minnesota, coming to you today from a field that was planted on April 21st of this year. And today just want to take a minute to talk about where we've been, kind of the scenarios we're in now, and then what we should be thinking about going forward here in the near term. So if we rewind back to the planting season, we were lucky to get a lot of our corn planted in the month of April and even early May. And from that standpoint, that was a little bit rare compared to the years past. A couple things that have maybe affected us from that standpoint is, although we were early and soils were fit, we were still fairly cool, below the soil temps we would really desire for optimum seedling germination and emergence for our corn stands. And that's probably obvious as we're out there picking rock, maybe making applications, scouting fields with ourselves, with customers, that the perfect stands aren't there. They aren't there very often. A couple things that impacted that obviously would be cooler soils. Another thing that I think came up in certain regions, especially as we get to the western side of the state, is drier soils, where maybe even if we were planting at 2 inches, for our seeding depth, we weren't planting into moisture, and we were waiting for precipitation to get that germination initiated, and that's where we're seeing some unevenness with that. Obviously, the corn sat in the ground for a fair amount of time, upwards of 3+ weeks sometimes, depending on the field and the region and the scenarios we were in. We were fairly cool, so some of those things obviously impacting our final stand. But with that being said, due to our planting time frame, we're in a pretty good position this year, even if we do have slightly reduced stands. To the standpoint of even University of Minnesota would tell us, with an early planting date like we have, if we have if we have 26,000 plant stand, we have 96% of our maximum yield, so still in a good position. Now obviously there's a lot of season to go. There's a lot of other variables that could impact this crop. We want to have higher stands than that if we can, but if we are a little bit reduced, the game isn't over. We still have potential for a pretty good crop here. Now with that being said, there's a whole host of different things that have occurred across Southwest Minnesota. There's not a lot of train wreck situations. Things look pretty good. I feel pretty good from that standpoint. Now when I look at where we're at today, and over the last week we're making a lot of post applications. Our crop is growing fairly rapidly with the heat that's going on right now. So as we're making those post applications, be mindful of what we have in the tank. We don't want to be putting any undue stress onto this crop, right? The stages that we're in, we're coming into determination for yield potential, especially as a field like this is actually just on the edge of the V6 growth stage, right? So now this field is in a situation where it's surrounded by a lot of trees, holds a little more heat, but we're getting to that critical time frame where we're determining what kind of yield potential we're really going to have for this crop. So be mindful of that as we're making those applications. And with that being said, we need to be thinking about our nutrient applications, or what kind of recommendations we're giving there. If we don't have the total nitrogen loading that we need up front, we need to be making sure we have the plans in place for that side dress application, or even that wide drop application that might be coming a little bit later in the vegetative stages around VT. So as we're making those plans, we need to be mindful that from this V5, V6 growth stage, as we get up to about R1, where we're fully tasseled, fully silked, we're in a situation where we're going through rapid uptake and rapid growth. And the plants are trying to bring in as much of the nutrients, especially as much nitrogen as they possibly can, because once we get to that reproductive growth stage, once the tassel's out, the silk's out, we start to slow down for what we bring up through the roots, right? We're trying to store as much of the nutrients in the plant, in the leaves, and the stalk as it can, so it has it there ready to feed that ear, fill heavy, healthy grain. That's the goal of what that plant's going to be doing as we get into those reproductive stages. So we need to be mindful about making those applications timely and setting ourselves up for a good yield potential from that standpoint. The other thing I want to talk about is fungicide applications. Now, there's a couple different camps out there. Some folks are maybe more towards the V5, and some folks are maybe more towards we would prefer a VT R1 type time frame if we're going to do a fungicide application. From what I see from our data in the past, from Iowa State data, from University of Minnesota as well, if we're going to do one fungicide application, I'm going to be targeting that VT to R1 time frame. And really what I'm looking at here is, as we get into that reproductive stages, I want to be telling that plant, you're healthy, you have the opportunity to fill grain, you don't need to abort any of those kernels. We're trying to push off any disease pressure that may be trying to infect or overcome that plant. We're trying to reduce any stress so the opportunistic diseases can't start to flourish and take over that plant and the health of that plant, right? Now, if I look at V5 applications, it has a very good purpose for targeting things like Physoderma, tar spot, even some early season, gray leaf spot as that's coming in around V8, V9, V10 stages. So good opportunity with a V5 application for specific disease control. But if I'm looking at general health and filling heavy grain and trying to maximize potential for that corn plant, I'm probably going to be targeting that VTR1. Obviously doing both is an option if you're in that situation or have someone in that situation, but for a single application, I primarily target that VTR1 time frame. Now, with all that being said, if we're going to prioritize specific fields, we need to be thinking about hybrids that maybe have a better response to the fungicide. We need to be thinking about field scenarios, right? So if we're in a corn-on-corn situation or a field that we know has had possible stress or disease pressure issues in the past, and we can try to help alleviate that with a timely, good quality fungicide application, that's going to be our best bet for quality return on that. So playing through those scenarios and those variables is going to help us make that decision to try to work out to the best outcome. Now, with this field being in the stage it is at V6, it's in a scenario where it's accumulated a little over 400 GDUs already this season. Like I said, it does hold a little more heat than maybe fields in your region that were planted, on that same time frame. But this is one, it's probably going to be silking around that mid-July, probably close to the third week of July time frame. Now, obviously, that's dependent on the weather we get from here on out and how Mother Nature plays through this season. But if we were to predict off of a 30-year average, that's where we're looking at. So at this point in the season, our GDU accumulation is just behind the 30-year trend. And honestly, if you look at when we started planting corn to today, we're actually right at or just above the trend, depending on your region and kind of the mileage you're getting off of your area and the temperatures in your area. So I feel very comfortable with our GDU accumulation thus far. Now we just, we're set up very well for the season. We just need to make sure that we're keeping the crop fed, we're protecting it and eliminating stress wherever we can. And as we move on from here, we have a lot of potential for the 2020 corn season. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to give us a call and appreciate your time.